Welcome everyone to our bi-weekly AI chat with this week, Dr. Katie Tuck talking about AI to support reviewing literature. In the chat is a link to the registration for today, a sign-in sheet where you can ask questions. You're also welcome to and encouraged to ask questions and be part of the chat as we go, and also a link to our community. And without further ado, Dr. Tuck.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited that you're here. We're going to be talking about AI for reviewing literature. And I'm going to be really clear that this is an opportunity for us to chat and learn together. I'm going to briefly share some screenshots of a couple of resources and tools that I've been exploring in my work. Feel free to jump in at any time. It is very likely if you're attending that you may have expertise that I don't have. So let's recognize that the expertise is shared among all the folks who are here. So feel free to jump in. I'm going to minimize this so that you all can see all of the screen, but please, again, just unmute. Feel free to jump in at any time. So again, I'm Katie Tuck, and I am really fortunate to be one of the co-PIs here at CITL, and I am the early childhood person. So I focus on our efforts to support early childhood educators and related service providers from birth through third grade. I am an associate professor at KU, and the reason why I'm organizing this chat is that I have a research line focused on synthesis and literature reviews, particularly in the context of reviewing single case design literature. So I'm going to bring you all back up so that I can see you. And if you could share in the chat where you are joining us from and your interests with reviewing AI literature. And then if you don't mind changing your name on your Zoom screen to the name that you prefer, that would be lovely. So again, in the chat, it's going to be right here in the bottom, just where you're joining and your interest with AI. And I am seeing so many people who are joining us whose work really drove my experiences as an educator and drove my work as a researcher. So I'm feeling a little intimidated, but I'm so honored that you're all here. So you can just type in the chat your name, where you're joining. Thanks, Jenny from Kentucky. Career exploration, excellent. And let us know what you're interested in. Colorado, AI for bilingual, multilingual learners. Clemson. Excellent. I'll be in Lehigh in April. You've got some great people out there. Lovely to have you join us, Sarah. Awesome. AI for pre-service teachers. Hi, Reagan. It's great to see you again. All right, so we've got a wealth of people. Please feel free to use that chat. Again, I'm going to make your faces disappear so that I can go to the slides. The slides are just here to kind of center our conversation. Again, feel free to interrupt at any point. So why access support for reviewing literature? Today, we're talking about AI tools that'll support us in figuring out the research literature that we want to find, but also AI tools that may help us start to synthesize or pull some of this information together. So I'm assuming that if you're on this call, you've probably tried to locate some relevant literature before. And quite frankly, it can be incredibly time consuming. It can be time consuming to get access to actual articles, but then to figure out what words or terms do I need to use in order to get what I'm interested in. And frankly, that often requires the person searching for the information to have some kind of background literature or background information on the types of articles or literature you're interested in. For example, if I want to know about AI use in early childhood, it's likely that simply using the term artificial intelligence and early childhood is going to get me to the wealth of articles or perhaps the lack thereof. I'm going to need to have some specialty knowledge to know, am I finding a bunch of trash or am I finding things that are likely in the literature base in which I'm interested? And the tricky part of these two requirements is that we know if you are affiliated with a university or institution that the licensing and access to different research literature is completely contingent on what our university decides to pay for. And there has been an empirical comparison conducted by Dr. Chris Lemons and colleagues in 2016 that showed with the exact same databases and the exact same search terms that two completely different research teams found wildly different results. Now, if you're not affiliated with an institution of higher education or a public library that has access, simply trying to get to literature that you're interested in can be really tricky simply because of paywalls. And so some of these AI tools are a way that we can get around some of these potential barriers for accessing research literature that may be of interest to us. We are really fortunate that the team here at CITL has created a PDF or a document to support us in leveraging technologies to support research. And a couple of the tools that I'm highlighting today are specifically from this guide. I will have one of my lovely team members put the link to this guide in the chat. It's freely accessible off of our website. It breaks down each tool by the purpose or the reason you may choose to use it. And again, I'm just going to highlight a couple. Okay, so we're going to go over two quick tools that we can use to find literature. The first is a tool called Consensus that can help us find relevant literature. The second is called Connected Papers. So let's say I found something that I'm interested in, but I want to know what else is out there that's of a similar topic. I can use a tool called Connected Papers. In the next couple of slides, I'm just going to show some brief screenshots of each of these. Again, feel free to unmute if you'd like to jump into the chat, but I'll show a quick screenshot and then we'll have a chance to chat about the usefulness or questions we may have about these tools. So Consensus is the first tool that I'm going to share. My work focuses on the use of visual activity schedules in early childhood to promote engagement. So I wanted to use that as an exemplar. And when I think about using Consensus, I think about it similar to a search engine or a database, but maybe I don't have access to all of the databases that may include research literature. Maybe I'm a teacher and that access is limited, or conversely, you're at an institution that doesn't have access to behavioral disorders journal or journal of early intervention or a journal around transition. And so you just want to get access to literature that you can't quite immediately get your hands on. So you're going to enter search terms or a topic that you're interested in into the navigation bar in Consensus, similar to that you would do in a database or in a Google Scholar search. There are some features of Consensus that require a subscription or an account. If you try to run multiple searches, you're going to end up needing a subscription or an account. But this image here on the right is a screenshot. I typed in visual schedules in early childhood. I get a general summarizing point, and then I have a list of articles that will come up. I can ask questions within each of those articles, or I can set reminders or tools to say, here are some literature that makes sense for me and my interests. The second option is Connected Papers. So I personally suggest for my students and in my coursework, we start with Consensus, particularly when we aren't super sure what words or terms make sense for what we're interested in. And then once we have a general idea of a couple of articles that may make sense, in this instance, I'm going to use this article right here, the first one that came up, using visual activity schedules for young children with challenging behavior. And I'm going to go to Connected Papers to figure out, okay, I've got one research article or I've got one piece of information that makes sense for me and that is focused on my interests. How do I find more? You may want to know folks who have cited similar work. So who else has cited information about visual activity schedules? You may want to just find additional literature, what other papers have looked at the use of visual activity schedules in early childhood. Or you may want to know who has cited this work because perhaps I'm interested in a tangential relation. So I may be interested in what do visual schedules look like in secondary settings, and maybe someone has cited one of the papers that I've found. Now, the features, if you just simply go to Connected Papers without an account, are limited. However, if you create an account, you can get more access to the features of the tool. So for those of you all who like visual representations of data or information, when I go into Connected Papers, you can see in this top section, I typed in the title from my Consensus search using visual activity schedules for young children, and then it creates this visual map of articles or papers that are of a similar topic that cite each other or that have similar interventions. So I can select these new relevant pieces of literature by clicking on any of the circles or by scrolling through a list here on the left. Now, the different shades indicate the year in which the work was ready. Excuse me, was written. Yes.
Have you found a way to export all of them outside of just typing in the name?
Into connected papers.
No, so like when I was doing my lit review, I used connected papers, found all these great ones, and there were way more than I wanted to type. And so I wanted to be able to export it into a spreadsheet so I could figure out if they met my inclusion criteria and I could keep good record, but I couldn't figure out how to do that.
So it's my understanding, if you see this tab right about pricing and login, that you can pay for that feature, but as a free feature, there's not a downloadable summative source of these records. That's a great question.
Dr. Tuck, I have another question.
Yes.
This
I hate
looks,
I can't see you. There we go.
this looks like Research Rabbit. Was Research Rabbit bought out, or is this just another one similar to Research Rabbit?
This is another tool super similar to Research Rabbit.
But Research Rabbit, you can download the articles from, which is really handy.
Yeah, and so Tara, thanks for bringing up another tool called Research Rabbit. If you have questions about that tool, that PDF that is in the chat around our CITL documents highlights Research Rabbit as one of the tools. Great question, Tara. Yep, and y'all feel free to call me Katie. All right, so we have two quick tools that we've reviewed around finding relevant literature. But now that we found the relevant literature, I'm going to highlight really briefly two tools that'll support us in analyzing that literature. So I found a group of visual activity schedule articles, and now I need some support with figuring out what actual information is included in them. So we're going to talk about a tool called Confidence, which can support the screening process, and then a tool called Elicit, which can support summarizing literature that you found that may be relevant for your topic. Okay, so Confidence is a screening tool. If you're familiar with conducting a literature review, it's a way that you can say, here are the criteria, the inclusion or exclusion criteria to get me to that pool of research articles that I'm super interested in, and I need to apply these criteria or rules to get me down to the relevant literature. This is an online feature where you can actually input your inclusion and exclusion criteria. You can input articles that you've downloaded from a database search or from a search like Research Rabbit. And then they're automatically built into the Confidence tool where you can use simple clicks of a button to be able to go through your title and abstract screening and your full text screening. You can also assign groups of literature to a secondary coder, let's say if you're conducting a systematic literature review. So here's what the initial piece in Confidence looks like. It allows you first to import your references, then you conduct your two levels of screening. It also automatically calculates agreement for you between the individuals who are coding or looking for the relevant information. It'll pull up an article. You can see a screenshot here on the left and then again on the right. It'll show you the article. You can decide to include it or exclude it. And then you can select a reason for exclusion, and this will then help you populate out so that you can provide a summary of how you got down to your included articles. If you're not sure, or you want to put a note, it allows the coders to put notes to each other. You can also say, yep, I'm going to move this on to screening, and I'm moving it through the process. Another beauty of using the Confidence screening tool is that it'll allow you to input key terms so that as your coders are looking through relevant literature, they're highlighting those key pieces of vocabulary or key intervention terms or population terms that you want them to note as they're engaging in screening. So here's an example of that. Something to note with Confidence is that if you make an error, which those of us who are conducting literature reviews may often do, or we realize, oh no, I need an additional exclusion criteria, or I have multiple design types in my literature review, and so I'm going to have to make decisions based on different participants and if data are disaggregated. If you go back into Confidence once you've started a screening process and you change the rules, you have to start all the way back at the beginning. So for my students who are doing literature reviews for the first time, I encourage them not to use this tool because it's often that they're going to need to add an additional criterion or remove a criterion or edit a criterion. and they've wasted a lot of time and effort using this tool because the tool does not allow you to edit in the middle of a search without starting over. However, for folks like Sam, who are working on their dissertation, or folks like me who are already in the field, who have conducted a few literature reviews, this is a tool that is pretty easy to train on as long as you're confident in your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And I see the chat, so oh, Tara uses it. Yes, Reagan. Rayan is super similar and is also a tool similar to Covidence that'll support with search and screening. And like Sam said, we have Rayan in our guide.
Katie, I have a quick question about being able to access these tools because it seems like there's a cost to Covidence.
Sure.
So how are you covering that cost, or what does that look like for you all?
Sure. So there is a small cost to each of these. And as with any AI tool, some things are free, and usually you get a better upgraded version and likely more protected data security or policies if you pay for it. For my particular research lab, I'm 7 years into my career, so I do not have a wealth of funds sitting. We have been really strategic using my professional development funds. And we have a central account, and then you can have multiple searches going simultaneously. And so that's how we've paid for it. If my students can access some small research funds through our institution, we've used that. I've also started to write it into any training grants. Because it's a subscription, I'm able to say, I'm going to put this small amount of money. Again, key here is create a general login that's not individuals to a single person's credential. So we have one for our project called Project Early, and then we've paid for it. And so any students or faculty who are on it, we share the account, and we just have some pretty clear data sharing rules that we have with each other. For example, if I'm running a search, I can't go into Lisa's. That is Lisa's project. I'm respecting her autonomy and her work, and we have shared agreements around it. That's a really great question.
I love your workarounds. That's feasible and smart to think about the OSEP training grants.
Yeah, I think that I was looking at getting at it school-wide. That's a great idea. Yeah, and Jamie is infamous for not wanting to use his school funds and being able to have personal accounts. I think for me as a more junior, low-key trying to go to mid-career at some point in the next few years, I have to use a workaround. And also I'm starting to find what tools I prefer, what tools are easier for my undergraduates to use versus my graduate students. I work with a lot of literature where some of the participants in the study count and some of them don't. And so I am pretty cautious with what tools I use to see, do they allow me to make that distinction? Because sometimes all of the article is included and sometimes only part of the article is included. And so I find tools like Covidence that have a note feature allow multiple people to go in and say, Tara and Sarah are the only ones that count in this article, or Bob and Jenny are excluded, but Tara and Sarah are included. So that then I can also look at agreement on the overall decision, but making sure we're pulling the right designs or participants out. These are all excellent questions. Yes.
If I can add, for anyone who's working on their dissertation and stuff like that, I'm not sure what the schools do, but they give us like a grant every year for working toward that. And so I was able to apply for that grant and use those funds to pay for Covidence and like Scrivener and things like that, those other tools. So that's very helpful.
Oh, that's a great piece of advice. I do know our institution has been trialing it. So as someone who teaches students how to look for relevant literature and also does it in my own work, I've made sure to have that really clear communication like Tara's talking about with the research librarian at my institution who is designated to do literature reviews, to be able to advocate and also say, hey, if you're doing any trials, here's my hands, come to me. We'll make sure that we do it. So then we can at least trial things out to try to avoid some of these cost prohibitive tools, particularly for students. I love, again, all the expertise. It's not with me, it's with everyone else who's here. All right, I'm going to go over one more tool and then we're going to be able to keep chatting. This tool is called Elicit. Now, I'm going to be really honest with you. I have not personally explored this one yet because I'm still trying to figure out how do I get data to be extracted for some participants in a research article, but not all of them. And I haven't quite loved what I'm getting from Elicit quite yet, but I have another colleague who is using it and is quite pleased with the results. So Elicit is a summarizing tool. You are able to input a series of articles that you found, or conversely, you can actually use Elicit to search for articles. And then once you have more or less a bucket of articles that have the relevant literature that you're interested in, you can set or probe questions or prompts for Elicit, and it will pull or extract quotes or information from all of these articles so that you have them summarized. Now, I want to be really clear, it pulls quotations. So if you're using this with students, students need to know that if I'm using Elicit as a tool, it's going to pull a direct quotation out of an article. So if one, we don't really want to use direct quotations without proper citation, so you're going to have to go back into the article and find the page, or conversely, you have to know any of the output from Elicit, you need to then paraphrase and put into your own words. This is a tool that does not have a freely accessible trial or option. You do need to have an account, and there is a cost. And again, cost dictates how many features you have access to. So here's what the output looks like. It outputs an Excel file or a CSV file that'll give you some general information about each article on the left-hand side. And then this colleague wanted to know a summary of main findings. This colleague wanted to know the methodology used. They were interested in outcomes and any named limitations. And then these last few columns are specific for what this researcher is interested in. She's interested in population characteristics and the research questions that are there. She also wants to know and is using Elicit right now to generally find the main findings or the results of an article. So then she can go through really quickly and be able to find relevant literature. Now, as you're noting, and as you can see on this screenshot tool, you could use a search feature within Excel, but it is going to take some time to be able to summarize or understand the information in each cell. So we're going to spend the rest of the time today chatting. I have some 3 probing questions from us. And again, want to redirect you to our tools and support on the CITL website that go over a wider breadth and array of tools. So I am going to bring everybody visually back up so we can see everyone and have a chat. We can answer any questions folks have. We can take this conversation in any direction you all may want. We can also chat about these 3 probing questions. You have all the power.
Katie, can you talk a little bit about, it seems like there are different ways to find the literature. How does that work in like the systematic process when we have certain, I don't want to say evidence-based, but certain expected, you're going to search your library, you're going to go through each of the articles, you're going to do a Prisma. How does that work when we're looking at these like more innovative AI tools?
Sure. So we have in the field of special education really beautiful guidance on literature reviews, meta-analyses that just came out in the new series of methodological papers. So that is in Exceptional Children and was supported by the Council for Exceptional Children. The new Prisma 2020 diagram by Page and colleagues has an entire right-hand column for more or less other ways of finding information rather than databases. And those Prisma guidelines for systematic searches and literature reviews and meta-analyses across scoping reviews, across narrative reviews, across quality and rigor analyses or critical reviews allows you as a user to explicitly type in. So our key, and if we are looking for relevant literature in order to summarize it in some product, such as a literature review, a meta-analysis, a scoping review, our key, just like any other part of our science, is transparency, clarity, and replication. It is totally okay to say, I conducted these database searches, then I use this tool, as long as you're reporting a record of here are how many records that I accessed using this tool, or here is the process. First, I looked at consensus to find some key relevant articles so that I would then know if my database searches were hitting relevant literature because I'm writing about something new or if I was getting mostly trash. Then I looked at connected papers to create or generate a larger list of likely relevant literature. Here are the number of records that those identified. I took them through my search and screening process. Here's how many were extracted at title abstract and how many I included. Then I went to an electronic database search. It is okay if you're bebopping or moving between traditional electronic database searches and these newer tools, as long as you report for your readers or you report for your audience. Here's how I came up with the information. Here's what I found. Here's how I made decisions about if it was relevant. I have a couple of students who are working on this right now, and we had one of them actually go back to connected papers after a traditional search because we weren't confident that we had captured all the literature, but we knew that we had 2 articles that were 100% included. And so we put them into connected papers to see, hey, are we missing anything? And if so, let's just grab it from this connected paper search and be transparent with that reporting. Great question. Lisa, I saw that you had a question.
Yeah, I did. Very new space for me, so I'm learning, trying to be brave. With Elicit, because it's the only one of the tools where we're actually putting data into this AI space. And so I wonder about the like proprietary piece of that, like I'm putting another researcher's work into this space, and where does it go, and ethically, what does that look like?
Yeah, this is a really relevant question, and I might be keying some of my colleagues to jump in on this as well. I think that anytime we're using a tool, whether it's for literature review or any feature of information, knowing the user agreement with the tool or the site or the technology that we're accessing is super important. That user agreement is likely to change if I am paying for access to a tool. It's likely to be a bit more protective, which means the information is going to stay within the tool compared to free access. And so that goes towards large language models, towards generative AI, as well as these AI tools that help us search through information. Theoretically, I am accessing articles through my university database or that are publicly available on the internet. So I'm not the one that put them there. Someone else did. I don't know that we have empirical ethical guidance on what this means. I do know that many folks, at least in the field of special education and related services, are recognizing that paywalls and publisher rights are sometimes limiting folks' access. So it may be that you're accessing a preprint, for example, on an open data repository like Open Science Framework, rather than the full, complete final article. I think the guidance that I would provide, and again, I'm glad Jamie is turning his camera back on because I'm going to tee to him in just a second, is that whatever you're doing, understand the user agreement and the access rules for the tools that you're accessing. And if you're unsure, there are likely resources at your institution that can be supportive. I don't know that I can give a blanket guidance for tool X is following XYZ rules and tool Y is only following rules Y and Z. And so here's the decision that you need to make. Unfortunately, that uniform guidance isn't available at this time. Jamie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I everything you just said. I mean, the issue that we have right now is that we have to trust the user agreements that have been established. But like, for instance, a case in point, 23andMe right now, which everyone kind of did the spit test and threw DNA into, is having difficulty staying afloat. And it's potentially going to sell to the highest bidder. And that changes the agreement that we all had with it when we gave our DNA. So I think these are all major issues that haven't been dealt with at the level they need to be through our policymakers in society. Have to start thinking about these sort of pieces around this data, especially with large data sets involving AI. So I think it's a good question to have. And to Katie's other point, the big thing that we kind of continue to point out here at CITL is that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, these companies, it does cost money for them to survive. They can't offer something for free. So if you believe you're getting something for free, you're actually not getting it for free. They're paying their bills somehow. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as we kind of go forward in this universe.
All right. Well, I want to stop on time. That's a great stopping point. Thank you so much, Dr. Tuck, for your presentation and really valuable information. I'm going to stop the recording, and you are more than welcome